On the northmostern edge of Appalachia's spine exists a mountain tribe renowned for producing fearsome mercenaries. Wielding great axes and known as warriors, these men and women learn to harness their inner beasts and translate that power into unbridled savagery on the battlefield. And so, hello warrior. Welcome to Work to Games 101 Warrior Tanking Guide. My name's Brian, and in this guide we're going to be talking about three things. 1. Stats and gear. 2. Skill rotations and the inner beast. And 3. Tips and tricks for the beast within. We're going to cover the basics for how to tank with the warrior Jom, covering all the way up to level 70. But without further ado, let's talk about the warrior. The warrior uses heavy armor and the great axe. This makes them incredibly fierce on the battlefield. What they lack in damage mitigation, they make up for with a huge HP pool. With this, they also have abilities that will help them recover and restore their own HP or TP, especially later on in the game. But to start, let's talk about their core stats. These relate specifically to the tank. The first one is Vitality, and increasing the Vitality stat is going to further enhance your HP. Certain abilities like Upheaval later on in the game will be impacted by this stat, especially if your HP is low, thus increasing your potency and your damage output. Speaking of damage output, Strength. Strength is the main core stat for how tank damage is calculated. Vitality for HP, Strength for damage. You can slot Matera into your gear, which can further enhance your strength. Just be sure to keep an eye out on your stat caps of the various gear. Running your daily roulette and then leveling up through the process is going to feed you with enough Matera to last you for a long time at endgame. So make wise choices and decisions with these stats. All tanks have a special stat called Tenacity. This increases your attack and your defense overall. Now, whether this is the most important stat to stack or if it's direct hit or critical hit, it's going to be up to you, the player, and the content that you run. There's constant debate in the community, and every patch has a potential to change which stat is better. So just keep that in mind. I'm not making any particular recommendation as to what you need to specifically slot. Only you can do that for yourself with enough practice and proper group makeup. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into skill rotations and the inner beast. All tank combos begin with Heavy Swing. This is your base level attack, and this starts with a potency of 150. From here, you have many directions to go, but focusing in on your hate building combo, we go into Skull Sunder. Skull Sunder combos with a potency of 200, and it's going to increase your hate. With Defiance or Deliverance stance on, you'll also see that your beast gauge increases by 10. From here, you can then combo into Butcher's Block. This has a combo potency of 280, and it's also going to increase your beast gauge by 10. The total potency for this combo is 630, and you'll also see an increase of your beast gauge by 20 points. We're going to talk more about the beast gauge here just in a little bit, but let's go ahead and dive back into our other combos. So our other combo, like all combos, start with Heavy Swing. From here, we're going to combo it into Maim, and then you have a choice, especially around level 50, of Storm's Eye or Storm's Path. At level 38, Storm's Path is going to allow you to absorb some of the damage dealt as HP, which is a real positive in your survivability, and this is also going to increase your beast gauge by 20 points. Storm's Eye, which is acquired at level 50, is going to add a bonus of 20% to your damage dealt for the next 30 seconds. So it's highly recommended that you keep Storm's Eye up at all times. Now, speaking of damage bonuses, you have the ability Berserk. It's learned at level 6, and it's got a recast time of 60 seconds. So you're going to be able to Berserk every 60 seconds. This lasts for 20 seconds. Pairing this with Storm's Eye grants you a lot of bonus damage. And with all these abilities, it's easy to start to build out various rotations. One rotation is your Berserk to Berserk time. So you want to be able to maximize your potency between the times that you can Berserk. But because Berserk lasts only 20 seconds, you want to weave this into your rotation. So a good basic starting rotation would be Heavy Swing, Berserk, Maim to Storm's Eye, then Heavy Swing to Maim to Storm's Path. You can actually do that Heavy Swing, Maim, and Storm's Path twice. And there you have kind of your basic rotation. Here you're maximizing your uptime of Berserk. You also have your 20% bonus from Storm's Eye. and you have your 30% bonus for Berserk. And with that, you're able to build out 70 beast gauge points throughout this entire rotation. There's more advanced tips that I'll talk about in later videos, namely weaving in potions and other abilities to help maximize that potency per second. But for now, let's go ahead and talk about the beast gauge and the various stances and what they mean for the warrior. The first stance the tank learns is Defiance. This is going to increase your maximum HP by 25% while at the same time reducing the amount of damage you output by 20%. This increases your own HP recovery via healing magic by 20% as well. The reason this is a stance is because you turn this on or you turn this off or you switch to another stance. But with this, you're able to gather beast gauge points, which you then can expend on 2 abilities. Those abilities are Steel Cyclone and Inner Beast. Now, Inner Beast is going to use 50 points of your beast gauge to be able to use, but it has a couple extra bonuses as well. First, it's going to absorb a portion of the damage dealt as HP, thus healing yourself. It's going to reduce damage taken by 20%, and that's going to last for 6 seconds. Now, Steel Cyclone is an AoE ability, and also just like Inner Beast, it's going to absorb a portion of the damage dealt as HP. This is perfect for when you're tanking. But when you're not, or even if you're the main tank and you want to do a little extra damage, at level 52 you learn the stance Deliverance. This doesn't increase your HP at all, and this doesn't have the damage penalty either. Instead, this is going to increase your damage dealt by 5%. And doing certain actions increases the beast gauge, and also helps increase your ability to pull off a critical hit by a maximum of 10%. Now, just like Defiance, you have 2 abilities that you can choose to use and expend those points within the beast gauge. Fell Cleave, which is learned at level 54, is your single target attack, and it's going to have an attack with a potency of 500. And it's also going to use 50 beast gauge points. And then you have Decimate, which is learned at level 60, and this allows you to deliver an AoE attack with a potency of 280. If you compare these to their Defiance counterparts, Fell Cleave is a potency increase of 150, up from 350 for Inner Beast. Decimate is a potency increase of 80, up from 200 for Steel Cyclone. These abilities don't restore any HP, so this is primarily for when you're wanting to output more DPS per second. As a tank, as soon as you learn Deliverance, whether you're doing main tanking or even off tanking, it's highly recommended to try to get into the practice of learning how to switch the different stances based off of what's happening. Finally, we have to talk about 2 other abilities that you pair with these 2 stances. Unchained, which is learned at level 40, and Inner Release, which is learned at level 70. Unchained is paired with Defiance and is changed immediately to Inner Release if you're in Deliverance stance and have that ability unlocked. These both share the same recast time, so using Unchained will prevent you from using Inner Release and vice versa. Personally, I recommend using Inner Release because this allows you to cut the cost of all your beast gauge actions in half. If you want to do up to 6 Fail Cleaves, Inner Release is the gateway drug to that, obviously paired with Infuriate. Now, with 120 second recast time, this is basically 2 Berserk rotations. So you can do this every 2 minutes. So hopefully easily and clearly with Warrior, you start to see how things are kind of going off this cadence. Every minute and then every 2 minutes. It's also highly encouraged and recommended to make sure that you pair these abilities with Berserk as well, keeping everything neatly packaged into 1 minute and 2 minute intervals respectively. This is going to take some practice, however, so try to get into the habit of hitting a striking dummy and getting into that cadence. Getting off in that cadence is just going to lead to total downtime while you wait for things to resync back into that 1 minute and 2 minute interval respectively. So before we move on to our final segment, there's a couple abilities that I want to highlight for you just so that you have a good understanding of what they do. Vengeance is the primary damage mitigation tool that a warrior has. You can cross-roll some, of course, but with Vengeance you're going to take 30% less damage. But you're also going to deliver a 50 potency attack back to your target. This is on a 120 second recast time, so just like with everything before it, every 2 minutes you can pop Vengeance and deliver more damage while at the same time taking less damage. Later in the game you're going to learn Upheaval. This ability on a 30-second recast time delivers an attack with a potency of 300. Now the potency decreases as your own HP decreases. Also, the potency is affected by your maximum HP, so using abilities like Thrill of Battle will help enhance this. This costs 20 points of your beast gauge, and it can only be executed under the effect of Defiance or Deliverance. Now speaking of Thrill of Battle is on a 120-second recast time. This is going to increase your maximum HP by 20%, thus making Upheaval even more potent. It heals for that same amount, so it is like getting an extra 20% HP, but it increases that maximum as well, so it's very handy. Now, next you'll see Shake It Off. This removes most all detrimental status effects. It can be executed while under the effect of the action that is stopping you from doing anything. Stun, sleep, silence, all that can become self-removable. So just having this ability in and of itself is very important. This means you won't have to wait for that Insuna. So just keep an eye out for any debuffs that are on yourself and be able to remove those at least every 60 seconds. Finally, we have Infuriate. On a 60-second recast time, the warrior gets a trait later that it reduces the recast time of Infuriate based off of certain actions. But at a base, every 60 seconds, you get 50 points to your beast gauge just like that. It can only be executed in combat now, which is a change from previous expansions, but this is a great ability. Weaving it into your rotations, as well as looking back at Inner Release and Decimate, being able to pull off 6 fail cleaves in a row is going to require that you weave in Infuriate, starting with a beast gauge of 100, and then having that cut in half allows you to get 4, and then you can easily Infuriate to get your beast gauge back up to be able to pull off 2 additional fail cleaves. But with those abilities being discussed, hopefully that gives you some form of knowledge about your skills and your abilities in the beast gauge. But now let's go ahead and dive into tips and tricks for the beast within. To start, if you're under level 50, I would recommend the best opening rotation being Tomahawk to 2 overpowers. It's important from an overpower perspective, you remember this is a conal AoE in front of you. It takes a little practice, but with that, you're going to get the hang of it really easily. This does some really good damage, but just watch your TP. I wouldn't recommend overpowering too much. Sometimes that can't be helped, especially in the early game. If you feel like you're losing hate, if you're struggling with that, make sure you overpower. With the changes in Stormblood, you don't have access to Flash, so there's no reason to even consider that at the moment. If you're coming back into this or you're still leveling, Tomahawk to help pull. It's going to generate a little bit more hate right from the start. Overpower to make sure you're hitting all targets. From here, let's talk about managing threat as a tank. Before we're even focusing in on trying to maximize your damage and output, it's important to make sure as the tank, if you are the main tank in any 4-man or even 8-man content, that the boss or enemies are focusing on you. The more that is the case, the more that you're going to find yourself having successful wins in the game in and of itself. So, threat management. It's important to hit all targets. Now, Overpower does this. If you find that you're losing threat on any particular target, switch to that target and gain it back. Make sure that once you're level 30, you have your tank stance on. This is going to feed you with additional HP. This is going to feed your ability to parry attacks. And the additional threat that is generated per every action, it can't be missed. You're going to find you're losing hate very easily once you have this ability, maybe even a little sooner. But there are also 2 UI elements that are given to you to help you manage threat. Otherwise, you might be just cycling blindly to figure out what enemies you need to hit. First, the enemy list. It's going to have various colors that designate the threat level on each enemy. You want this all in the red, especially if you're main tanking. If you see anything dip into orange, yellow, green, etc., that means that that target is focusing in on somebody else. Then if you want to know how much threat you have generated on a specific target, use your party list. It's going to tell you who's winning and who's losing in the threat management department. If you look at your party list, A represents first place, then you'll see 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to tell you who has the most threat and what order from there you need to worry about. There's also a little bar that appears under your icon, and that's going to show you how much threat that individual has generated. If your bar is full and everybody else's is fairly low, you can easily switch to another target with confidence, knowing that most likely you're not going to lose it at this point. Now, once you're past level 50 and you have pretty much your base level rotations, pulls should still start with Tomahawk. Every pull should start with this ability. It helps pull from range, it helps you start to generate threat right at the beginning. followed by maybe 1 or 2 overpowers, just depending on how you feel. Infuriate is a great skill that's going to help increase your beast gauge, so if you don't have much to start and that's off cooldown, being able to do this and pop a Steel Cyclone to help generate even more threat, as well as do some basic HP recovery is super important. Once you have the threat, it's just best to go and practice and get into the idea of your base rotation. Again, we talked about Berserk being on every 60 seconds, weaving that into your Storm's Eye and then Storm's Path combo, which will feed you Beast Gauge, which will allow you to pull off and execute those moves. This is, in essence, what the warrior is. Defiance is going to help keep you alive and help keep you in self-recovery. There has been many, and there will be many times, where warriors will solo things just because of their ability to self-recover and output damage at the same time. But the best of them get in the habit of stance dancing. This is where you shift from Defiance to Deliverance. This is where you sacrifice HP and HP recovery for pure damage output. This takes practice, this takes confidence, this takes a competent healer at times, but just keep this in mind. It's important to get into that idea because your best hitting abilities are going to be in this stance. Your best damage output is going to be in Deliverance. And at the end of the day, I think those skills even look cooler, but you know what? That's just my personal opinion on the matter. We said this earlier, but the cadence of the warrior is 1 minute and 2 minute intervals. What can you do within that time? Your priorities as a tank are first to hold the threat. And then, with warrior specifically, you have a lot of damage output potential. But that just is going to be gained with practice and understanding of your abilities and learning how to weave those in and build out hopefully interesting rotations. We are going to cover more advanced rotations in a later guide, especially when we talk about 6 fail cleaves and that inner release. But hopefully this has been a help. Hopefully this gives you the starting tools to tackle warrior and jump in the game and tear things apart. My name is Brian and this is Work to Game. Thanks so much for watching this video. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns in the comments below, and we'll be sure to try to address them in a future video. But with that, my name is Brian and this is Work to Game. Thanks for watching our Warrior 101 guide, and hopefully this has been a help. Let us know if you have any questions in the comments below and we'll do our best to get to them as quickly as possible. And we thank you for watching this video, and we hope to see you on our next. But until then, we hope you have a fantastic week, and take care. Hey everybody, Brian and Chuck here for Work to Game. Chuck wants to tell you that you should totally subscribe to the channel, and that you should totally hit that like button. Oh, and then we also got t-shirts on sale for some reason. That's a little bit mean, Chuck. I'm not crazy.